It started with a knock on the dock gate. Karen, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched like a crown of self-importance. She told my wife she was violating HOA recreational use limits by sitting on our own property. My wife calmly ignored her. That's when Karen made the biggest mistake of her life. She called the cops. Well, she didn't know. My wife isn't just calm under pressure. She trains federal agents to handle hostage negotiations. She's the director of a regional FBI bureau. And Karen had just accused her of trespassing on federally documented land she personally helped secure. The moment Karen tried to evict us from our own ranch lake, she triggered something no HOA tyrant ever wants, an investigation that doesn't end with a slap on the wrist. It ends with indictments. Because sometimes the badge doesn't hang on a cop's chest. Sometimes it walks in wearing a tailored blazer and a federal seal. Most people think of retirement as a winding down, porch swings, crossword puzzles, maybe golf. Not us. After decades of service, my wife and I didn't want quiet. We wanted solitude. There's a difference. Quiet can still come with noise, phones ringing, HOA newsletters in the mailbox, small-town politics. But solitude? That's freedom. So when we bought the Lake Ranch, 60 acres of pine-wrapped land with a horseshoe lake right in the middle, we weren't just buying property. We were buying our peace. We didn't need much. The house was modest, just one story with a long back porch that stretched out to the water's edge. I spent my mornings feeding the chickens and tending the vegetable beds. My wife liked to kayak around the lake in the early hours before the sun hit the trees. Evenings were for firewood, campfires, and when the mood struck, a bottle of Malbec under a blanket of stars. We rarely saw neighbors. Our nearest one was nearly half a mile up the ridge. The only real contact we had with the outside world was the HOA. And even then, it was mostly emails, newsletters about brush clearing, and fire risk reminders. We didn't care. We paid our dues, kept to ourselves, and figured the HOA kept the hiking trails clean. Enter Karen Wellington. We first heard the name during our third month on the property. The HOA email signature changed from Lakeview Community Board to Karen Wellington, President, Lakeview Lakeshore Preservation Committee. That should have been the first clue. A job title that long usually means the job itself is small, but the ego is massive. Still, we ignored it until the notice came. One Friday morning in late April, a bright orange envelope was stuck under our front gate latch. Not mailed, not delivered professionally, just wedged into the metal. It was labeled Urgent Violation. I opened it under the porch light and squinted at the letterhead. Violation Code. Section 4F. Unauthorized recreational use of shared lakefront property. Description: unregistered social gathering involving open flames and amplified sound. I blinked. My wife came over with her coffee, looked at the letter, and snorted. They mean our marshmallow night? Apparently so. 3 days earlier, we had hosted our godchildren for a weekend visit. We lit a small campfire, made s'mores, and played folk music through a tiny Bluetooth speaker that couldn't have carried more than 50 feet. There were 6 of us total, all on our property, no guests from outside. I reread the letter. At the bottom was a handwritten note. This is your only warning. Any further misuse of the lakefront will result in law enforcement involvement and HOA penalties. Signed, Karen Wellington, President. I called the HOA office to clarify. A woman answered, not Karen, and immediately seemed apologetic when I mentioned our names. I'll let Karen call you back, she said. She never did. Instead, another notice came, this one formalized, citing the same violation, now including a $250 fine. That was when my wife stepped in. She walked to the desk by the window, opened the ranch safe, and pulled out a thin binder. Inside were all the property documents, surveys, deeds, and, most importantly, our water access easement and lake bed ownership paperwork. You see, unlike most residents, our lake wasn't shared HOA space. It was carved into our private deed, with legal ownership of both shoreline and dock confirmed by the County Water Board. I'm not responding to this, she said, flipping through the documents. I figured, if they want to escalate, let them. And escalate Karen did. The next weekend, while my wife sat alone at the end of our dock reading, a sheriff's cruiser rolled up our gravel drive. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone had reported a bear. Then I saw Karen trailing behind the cruiser in her spotless white SUV, arms crossed, sunglasses perched like she was filming an episode of Lakefront Law and Order. I stepped onto the porch, nodding as the two deputies exited the cruiser. "Mornin', gentlemen. Something going on?" One of them, Officer Dempsey, offered a polite smile. "We received a report from the HOA president of unauthorized trespassing and property disturbance at this address. Said she has repeated documentation." Karen stepped forward. "She's on the dock right now," she said, pointing toward the lake. "That's common access. She refuses to acknowledge community rules. This is the third violation in under 2 months." I almost laughed. "Karen," I said, "that dock's been part of this property for nearly 40 years. You're not even on the plat map for this section of the lake." Karen didn't blink. "That's disputed," she snapped, "and I filed it with the HOA attorney." Dempsey held up a hand, calm. "Mind if we speak with the individual down by the water?" I shrugged. "Be my guest." They walked down the gravel path to the dock where my wife sat, legs crossed, sun hat shading her face, paperback in hand. I watched as Dempsey approached her. He asked something. She nodded once, closed her book, reached in her bag, and handed him what I already knew was her ID. His partner leaned in a look. Both men stiffened slightly. Dempsey stepped back, cleared his throat, and handed her ID back with both hands. "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you, ma'am." Karen's smug expression began to wobble. "What's going on?" she called from the path. Dempsey turned to her. "Ms. Wellington, the property in question is not HOA jurisdiction. The dock, shoreline, and water rights are deeded to the homeowners. Furthermore, the individual in question is—" He paused. "Director Olivia Sharp, Federal Bureau of Investigation." Karen froze. Silence fell. "You're lying," she said after a beat, voice brittle. My wife stood, calm as ever, her badge now visible around her neck. "I recommend you cease using law enforcement as a personal tool," she said evenly. "It's a misuse of public resources and could constitute harassment." Dempsey gave a slight nod. "She's correct. No violations here. We'll be filing a record of this stop." "Ma'am," he turned to Karen, "you'll be informed if any further action is deemed necessary." Karen's face was redder than the clay dirt under her SUV. She turned, stormed back to her vehicle, slammed the door, and sped off, flinging pebbles down the drive. The deputies apologized for the intrusion. We thanked them for their professionalism. When they left, my wife and I sat back down on the dock. "So that happened," I said. She smirked. "I give her a week before she tries something worse." And she was right, because Karen didn't just stop at one phone call. She had no idea she had just declared war with someone who investigates public corruption, espionage, and racketeering for a living. And my wife wasn't about to sit back and play defense. She was about to launch a counterstrike that would turn the entire HOA board inside out. My wife has a saying, "Everyone thinks they're invisible until the paperwork says otherwise." It's her way of describing people like Karen, small-time tyrants, so wrapped in their own control, they forget the law sees everything eventually. After the deputies left and Karen's SUV vanished over the ridge, we could have just let it go. The officers had confirmed our ownership. No charges were filed. Case closed, right? Not even close. Because Karen didn't just try to weaponize an HOA rulebook, she tried to weaponize the police against the director of a federal agency. And in our world, that's not just a misstep. That's an invitation. My wife disappeared into her office that night. The light stayed on well past midnight. When I walked in the next morning with coffee, she already had a whiteboard mapped out with names, dates, citations, and HOA letterhead samples pinned to a corkboard. "Tell me you didn't stay up all night." She didn't answer. She was already deep in the county records database, cross-referencing homeowner complaints, violation notices, and HOA board meeting summaries. "We need 3 things," she said. "Proof of systemic abuse, proof of financial misconduct, and proof of procedural fraud." I blinked. "So, with just a light Sunday project?" She smirked. "Let's see what your spreadsheet skills are really worth." The first layer was the obvious one. Karen had been issuing bogus citations for things not covered in the HOA charter. The Marshmallow Fire? Totally allowed under the recreational use section for properties with lake access. We documented that, but it didn't stop there. Within a week, we'd spoken with 10 other homeowners, quiet conversations at the farmer's market, post office, and by the hiking trail. Turns out, Karen had a habit of overstepping. Mr. Harris, a retired aerospace engineer, had been fined 3 times for unauthorized vehicle storage because his vintage pickup didn't meet community visual standards. The truck was fully registered and parked in his own driveway. Naomi Foster, a single mom of 3, was cited for excessive front yard clutter. Her crime? Letting her kids leave their scooters on the lawn after school. When she appealed, Karen denied her request by email within 5 hours. No board vote. No hearing. And then there was the Chowdhury family. They'd hosted a small birthday party for their daughter, 10 people, all family, on their back patio. No music, no fire, no noise complaint. Yet they received a $500 fine for unauthorized event hosting. When they asked to see the official complaint, Karen said it was submitted anonymously and could not be disclosed for safety reasons. My wife raised an eyebrow at that. An HOA isn't a covert agency, she muttered. You don't get to redact your own witnesses. We collected statements, documented citations, cross-referenced every claim with the HOA bylaws. Then we started on the money. According to the HOA financial disclosures, such as they were, nearly $40,000 have been spent in the last year on landscaping enhancements, consulting, and community beautification projects. We found no meeting minutes approving those expenditures. Digging deeper, we traced the checks. The landscaping firm used for all projects, Horizon Harmony Landscapes, was registered to a Charles Wellington, Karen's cousin. Same mailing address she used for personal correspondence. He had no business website, just a phone number and a P.O. box. That alone was damning. But it got worse. My wife submitted a Freedom of Information request to the county registrar's office, asking for all permit applications filed by the HOA in the last 2 years. The documents showed multiple permit requests for projects never completed, like shoreline restoration and bench installation. The funds were marked disbursed in HOA records, but the projects didn't exist. We visited the sites ourselves. Nothing but bare dirt and a few weeds. Not even shovel marks. Then came the privacy breach. Naomi, now a full-fledged ally in our investigation, forwarded us an HOA newsletter she received last year. In it, Karen addressed Naomi's recent fine and subtly referenced her work schedule, stating, "We understand some residents may have non-traditional hours, but that doesn't exempt them from compliance." Naomi had never publicly shared her schedule, but she had emailed Karen once explaining that she worked overnight shifts at the hospital and missed a board meeting. My wife stared at the screen. "That's a HIPAA adjacency if I've ever seen one," she whispered. "She's weaponizing private information. It's not just unethical, it's illegal." We checked further. Karen had a pattern of doing this, citing anonymous tips or referencing conversations homeowners thought were confidential. It all painted a clear picture. A woman who believed being HOA president meant being queen, and she'd build a court of loyal sycophants to keep her throne. 3 of the 5 board members were longtime family friends. 2 of them had received landscaping upgrades at discounted rates, paid in part by HOA funds. One of them, Brian Cole, had sold Karen his old ATV, which was now being used to patrol the walking trails. It was labeled Community Watch Vehicle, but we could find no record of the board approving its purchase or usage. And then came the forgery. A neighbor named Sherry Martinez showed us a citation she'd received for dog noise violations after her golden retriever barked one afternoon. The notice included a formal complaint, supposedly signed by 3 residents. We checked the names. 2 denied signing anything. One had moved away months earlier. My wife tilted her head and said softly, "Forgery using fake community records. That's federal wire fraud if it was emailed. And if she printed and mailed it." She trailed off. Mail fraud. We weren't just looking at abuse of HOA authority. We were staring down a long trail of potentially criminal behavior. So we did what any good federal agent would do. We built a dossier. Every document, every testimony, every violation notice, and email. We scanned, indexed, time-stamped, and printed it all. Photos of incomplete projects. Screenshots of financial records. Copies of redacted but legally referenced email chains. It became a 3-inch binder labeled Karen Wellington, File 001. Subject: HOA abuse, fraud, and misconduct. But we didn't stop there. We organized a digital backup hosted offsite. We compiled timelines showing when citations increased, often coinciding with moments when homeowners declined Karen's requests, like joining a committee or voting in her favor. We even built a heat map showing which parts of the neighborhood were fined most frequently. The pattern was obvious. New homeowners, families with kids, and those who didn't fit in were targeted most often. By the end of the second week, even one of Karen's board allies, Tina Barlow, approached us privately. I didn't know," she said, voice shaking. Karen always handled the paperwork. We trusted her. But this isn't okay. We didn't blame Tina. That's how people like Karen stay in power, by keeping others in the dark and running everything through unofficial channels. But now the light was pouring in. My wife reviewed the binder one last time. "Tomorrow," she said, "we send this to the county attorney, the state HOA Oversight Board, and the Regional Bureau for Conflict of Interest Investigations." I nodded. "What about Karen?" She paused. "She'll know soon enough. But we're not going to knock on her door." She closed the binder with a satisfying snap. "We're going to let the subpoenas do that." Karen always fancied herself untouchable, the kind of small-town monarch who ruled by decree and dared anyone to question the crown. But tyrants rarely notice the quiet shuffle of chess pieces until the board is tilted against them, and my wife is a grandmaster of silent moves. 1. Setting the traps. 2 days after we finished compiling the binder, Olivia drafted 3 letters, each one crisp, factual, and weaponized with citations. State HOA Regulatory Authority. A formal complaint outlining procedural violations, selective enforcement, and potential embezzlement. County Attorney General's Office. A request for immediate oversight and an injunction against further fines until an audit was complete. FBI Office of Professional Responsibility, OPR. A confidential memorandum noting suspected mail and wire fraud, forged documents, and misuse of personal data. Each envelope contained the same supporting dossier, numbered exhibits, time-stamped photos, signed affidavits, and a thumb drive with a full digital archive. She couriered the packets before dawn, leaving no electronic trail on HOA networks that Karen might sniff out. By lunchtime, signatures confirmed delivery. Olivia's final email was to a trusted colleague at the Bureau's Internal Corruption Task Force. Heads up, possible public sector fraud tied to community association in Lakeview. Expect state authorities to request federal liaison. No dramatic flourish, no direct order. Just a breadcrumb left where the right eyes would find it. 2. The audit ignites. State regulators operate slowly, unless you hand them a roadmap to wrongdoing. 48 hours after receiving our complaint, the state HOA authority issued an order to preserve records to Lakeview Lakeshore HOA. Karen woke up to a certified letter demanding every ledger, invoice, and board vote from the last 5 fiscal years. The same morning, the county attorney general faxed a notice of preliminary investigation to the HOA's P.O. box, also Karen's post office locker, citing credible allegations of financial impropriety. The fax machine sat in the clerk's office, public space, so by noon, whispers were already circulating the general store. "Did you hear? Karen's HOA books are under review. They're saying subpoenas are coming." Word travels fast in a lake community, especially when half the residents feel wronged. 3. Karen's first misstep. Karen called an emergency board session that night. No agenda, no notice, breaking her own bylaws for the 5th time that month. She stormed into the lodge with eyes blazing and demanded full compliance from her directors. But even her loyalists looked rattled. Nobody wanted to be caught shredding documents. Tina Barlow, the treasurer who had quietly reached out to us, spoke first. "Karen, we should hire an independent CPA and cooperate. If the state finds gaps, we'll look transparent." Karen slammed her binder shut. "Transparency? They're vultures. We control the narrative. We'll review the records internally first. Internal review meant hiding skeletons, and everyone knew it. Brian Cole, the Community Watch ATV owner, visibly paled. We signed the paychecks, Karen. If this gets ugly. She cut him off. Then we fight back. 4. The Ethics Division steps in. 3 days later, an unmarked sedan rolled up to Karen's driveway. 2 agents from the FBI's Ethics and Integrity in Government Unit stepped out, badges glinting in the morning sun. They served Karen with a federal records preservation notice. Any destruction of potential evidence could constitute obstruction of justice. Karen's composure cracked. Neighbors reported she stood frozen on her porch while agents cataloged mailboxes and photographed HOA filing cabinets stored in her garage. She tried to demand jurisdictional proof. The lead agent merely pointed to the seal on his credentials. Not even Karen could talk her way past that. 5. Preparing for the board showdown. Meanwhile, Olivia kept chess clock timing every move. She filed a motion with the county clerk to obtain a temporary restraining order prohibiting the HOA from issuing new fines until the audit concluded. She scheduled, not requested, scheduled, a slot on the next official board agenda under homeowner concerns, forcing Karen to give her public speaking time. She quietly gifted every sympathetic neighbor a concise, Know Your Rights pamphlet, outlining how to rebut fraudulent citations and request formal hearings. Residents began marking their calendars for the upcoming board meeting like it was Super Bowl Sunday. 6. Subpoena Day. A week before the meeting, uniformed deputies hand-delivered county subpoenas to Karen's door demanding bank statements, canceled checks, and vendor contracts. At each board member's house, the same papers arrived. Karen's allies started calling one another in panic. One even left a message on Olivia's anonymous tip line. I didn't sign off on half those expenditures. Tell the auditors I'll cooperate. The dominoes clicked. 7. Board meeting, public reckoning. Date, 3rd Thursday, 7 p.m. Venue, Lakeview Recreation Hall. Folding chairs, acoustic tile ceiling, air buzzing with whispered speculation. Karen entered first, shoulders squared, a rehearsed smile plastered on her face. She wore the HOA lapel pin like a shield and clutched a thick folder labeled Defense. The hall, usually half empty, was standing room only. Retirees, young families, even the deputy who'd first responded to Karen's trespass call. The agenda ticked by, approval of minutes, budget updates, until item 5, homeowner concerns. Olivia rose from the second row, dressed simply in jeans and a blazer, a deliberate contrast to Karen's power suit. She carried nothing but an iPad and a small stack of papers. Olivia, Madam President, board members, neighbors, thank you for the floor. I wish I could speak only of community barbecues and trail maintenance. Unfortunately, recent events leave us no choice but to address serious breaches of trust. She tapped the iPad. A projection screen behind her lit up. Exhibit A. Financial ledger screenshots, $12,000 to Horizon Harmony Landscapes, $9,200 to Community Communication Consultant, all without board vote references. Murmurs rippled. Olivia, according to HOA Bylaw Section 6.2, any expenditure over $2,500 requires full board approval. Yet these invoices show single signature authorization, Karen Wellington's. Karen shot up. Point of order. Those slides are unverified, private documents. Olivia, calmly. They're subpoenaed evidence, Ms. Wellington. Public by court order. She advanced to Exhibit B. Scanned violation notices with forged homeowner signatures, side by side with actual signatures for comparison. Gasps filled the hall. Olivia. Forgery of official documents issued through mail constitutes mail fraud, punishable under 18 U.S.C. Section 1341. Karen's voice wavered. These are fabrications anyone could have. Brian Cole, her once loyal director, suddenly stood. Karen, those are my initials, but I never signed those fines. You told me they were placeholders. More gasps. Someone whispered, unreal. Exhibit C. An aerial map overlay showing fines clustered around newer homeowners, families with children, and residents of color. Olivia, selective enforcement, discriminatory pattern. In 3 years, 78% of fines went to 22% of households, mostly newcomers and minorities. That's civil rights territory, folks. A young mother raised her hand. My son's birthday slip-and-slide cost us $400. I thought it was just bad luck. Olivia nodded. It wasn't luck. It was targeting. 8. Collapse of an empire. Karen's last defense was outrage. She tried to rally the board. This is a witch hunt. She's abusing federal power for a personal vendetta. But the board members, eyes fixed on the evidence, looked away. The treasurer whispered to the secretary, then spoke up. Madam President, I move to suspend you pending investigation. Silence. Then a second. A vote was called, secret ballot, but no one bothered hiding their hands. The result, 4-0 for immediate suspension. Karen's lapel pin seemed to weigh 100 pounds as she unclipped it and set it on the table. Residents burst into uneasy applause, relief mixed with disbelief. Karen, red-eyed, shoved her folder into a tote and fled through the side door, camera flashes trailing her into the parking lot. 9. Aftershocks. In the following days, state auditors occupied a spare office at the lodge, sifting through years of receipts. County investigators interviewed homeowners, confirming forged signatures and backdated citations. FBI OPR opened a parallel inquiry into mailbox tampering and fraudulent interstate email communications. News of an HOA president under federal scrutiny made local headlines. Karen's once tight inner circle melted. Board members raced to provide statements of cooperation. Horizon Harmony Landscapes shuttered overnight, its sign ripped from the P.O. Box wall. 10. A community transformed. With Karen suspended, the acting president, Tina Barlow, called a special election for fresh board seats and proposed emergency bylaw amendments, term limits, mandatory competitive bidding, resident oversight committees. At the next community social, neighbors compared notes with cautious smiles. The Chowdhury showed photos of their first citation-free backyard barbecue. Naomi's kids zipped past on scooters, no one snapping pictures for evidence. Mr. Harris parked his vintage pickup proudly at the center of the lot, a protest-turned badge of honor. Karen's mansion at the Lake's Bend sat dark. A for sale by owner sign sprouted on the lawn within a month. Price slashed twice before any offer came through. 11. Checkmate. It took less than 30 days from Olivia's first couriered letter to Karen's public downfall. A masterclass in surgical justice. Strategic paper trail to trigger regulators. Quiet coalition building to ensure witnesses. Public evidence drop-timed for maximum transparency. Law enforcement coordination that Karen never saw coming. And the beauty? Olivia never once raised her voice or flashed her badge. She let the documents speak, the laws enforce themselves, and the community reclaim its voice. Karen thought power came from policing picnic tables and measuring grass height. She forgot real authority comes from accountability, and no clipboard can stand against that. The night after Karen's suspension, thunder rolled in off the foothills, rattling every window around Lakeview. It felt fitting. Nature staging the overture to a storm Karen was about to unleash. Power may have slipped from her fingers in that packed recreation hall, but she still believed in one last tactic, scorched earth. 1. Karen's countervolley. At dawn our phones chimed with fresh emails. Urgent. Special HOA security bulletin. Karen, now signing as interim compliance officer, claimed she retained authority over ongoing safety matters. Attached were a dozen new violations. Unauthorized fencing upgrades. Our ranch had stood unchanged since 1983. Excessive livestock odor. We owned 3 chickens, none of which smelled. Illegal dock expansion. That same ancient dock she tried to commandeer. Every notice came stamped with a red, final warning, demands for payment, and veiled threats of liens. She copied local businesses, the sheriff's office, even a subsection of the county zoning board. Anyone whose address she could mine from public sites. Her goal was transparent. Bury us in paperwork, tarnish us as neighborhood menaces, and paint the board suspension vote as a coup orchestrated by federal intimidation. Then she upped the ante. 2. The character assassination campaign. That afternoon, several residents, including Tina Barlow, now acting president, received glossy flyers in their mailboxes. On one side, my wife's official Head & Shoulders photo from the Bureau website. On the other, bold, accusatory text. Should a federal bureaucrat control your home? Olivia Sharp uses your dues to fund her personal vendetta. She weaponizes the FBI against honest volunteers. Is this the community you want? Karen even created a website, LakeviewTruthWatch.com, riddled with out-of-context snippet from my wife's public speeches and a doctor timeline suggesting Olivia targeted ordinary citizens for hobby crimes. It looked convincing at first glance, until you notice the misspelled legal citations and the PayPal link marks support our defense fund. Still, fear is contagious, and for 48 hours a sliver of the neighborhood wavered. People who had never met my wife Googled FBI abuse stories and wondered if Karen, misguided as she seemed, might be fighting big government overreach. 3. The truth strikes back. Olivia answered none of it directly. Instead, she gathered the board's new ethics committee, hurriedly formed after Karen's suspension, and laid out a plan. Full transparency drop. The committee would release every audit finding, witness statement, and invoice online. No paywalls, no redactions. Sunlight, pure and simple. Community Q&A Town Hall. A live stream session where any resident could raise a hand and ask any question, with supporting documents projected in real time. Official disciplinary hearing. The state HOA authority, pushed by mounting evidence, scheduled a formal adjudication to decide Karen's permanent fate and invited the public. The transparency drop went live first. Within hours, Karen's landscaping kickback scheme trended on the regional subreddit. Photos of empty work sites, duplicate invoices, and forged signatures circulated faster than Karen could refresh her false website. Each post cited page numbers and audit IDs. No rumors, just receipts. That night, Brian Cole, the ATV loyalist, posted a heartfelt apology on Nextdoor. I backed Karen because I trusted her. The documents show I was wrong. I'm sorry for the part one played. Apology posts multiplied. Residents who'd hesitated called or emailed us with new pieces of the puzzle. Text Karen sent threatening fines if they didn't show public solidarity. Emails where she bragged about one-upping the feds, even audio clips of meetings she'd illegally recorded. With every upload, her credibility bled out. 4. Karen's last stand appeal. Cornered, Karen fired off cease and desist letters through a discount legal service, claiming defamation, breach of privacy, and emotional distress. She sent one to the local paper, one to the HOA, and one, bizarrely, to the sheriff's K-9 unit after a deputy liked a tweet criticizing her. Each letter ended with the same demand: reinstate me immediately or face litigation. Olivia answered none of them. The state disciplinary panel, however, took notice, viewing the barrage as intimidation of witnesses. They moved the hearing date up, citing ongoing escalation. Karen tried one more gambit. She filed an ethics complaint against Olivia with the Office of Inspector General, accusing her of using a federal database to dig into private citizens. The OIG dismissed it the next day. Karen had attached no evidence, only conjecture. Worse for her, filing a knowingly false federal complaint is itself a crime, and the agent reviewing the case forwarded the info to the very ethics division already circling her for mail fraud. 5. The Day of Reckoning, HOA Town Hall. Date: first Saturday of the month. Venue: same recreation hall, but now TV vans line the gravel lot. Mass cameras pointed skyward, reporters doing live stand UPS against the backdrop of pines. The headline scrolling across local news read, HOA Scandal, President Accused of Fraud Faces Tribunal. Inside, folding chairs were replaced by rows of cushioned seats rented by the state board for formality. At the front, a raised platform with 3 officials sworn in to oversee testimony. Nameplates glinted under fluorescent lights. One seat remained empty, reserved for the respondent. Karen arrived 10 minutes late, flanked by a freshly hired attorney who looked more bewildered than confident. She wore a muted gray suit, hair pulled into an austere bun. No lipstick, no pin. She had shed every symbol of authority in hopes of seeming victimized. Olivia sat several rows back, blending in with neighbors, a notebook balanced on her knee. She turned down interview requests all week. "Our story isn't about me," she told reporters. "It's about a community taking itself back." The chairwoman banged the gavel precisely at 9 a.m. "We will hear evidence regarding alleged misconduct by Ms. Karen Wellington during her tenure as president of the Lakeview Lakeshore Homeowners Association." A. Financial testimony. A forensic accountant hired by the state took the microphone first. Slide after slide detailed $62,450 in payments to Horizon Harmony Landscapes. Only $8,200 reflected in genuine work orders. Duplicate check numbers indicating ledger tampering. Consultant fees funneled to accounts linked to Karen's niece. Karen's lawyer objected frequently, irrelevant, prejudicial, but the board overruled. Relevance was baked into the audit. B. Forgery and fraud. Next came Tina, trembling but resolute, producing side-by-side scans. Forged signatures versus real ones. She recounted seeing Karen sign in homeowners' names and instructing Tina to make it match. The room inhaled collectively. Naomi testified third. She described receiving fines timed precisely with her night shifts and later finding her work schedule quoted in Karen's newsletter. When asked how Karen obtained that information, Naomi answered, voice cracking, "Only through my private email to her." The chairwoman nodded gravely. That aligns with the allegation of personal data misuse. C. The ethical bombshell. Finally, Olivia stepped to the front. Not in uniform, no badge showing, just a citizen with a folder. "I submit into record a chain of text messages, authenticated via subpoena, wherein Ms. Wellington admits she planned to make an example of family she found unfit for lakeside living." A hush fell. The messages appeared on screen. "Start writing those citations. They'll move out or shut up. I'll call the sheriff. They'll think twice next time." Karen's attorney objected again. Privacy violation. Context. The ethics board chair quietly clarified. The subpoena was lawfully issued. Privacy did not shield wrongdoing. Olivia closed her folder, looked directly at Karen, and spoke only one sentence. "Justice isn't intimidation, it's accountability." She returned to her seat amidst a ripple of applause. 6. Verdict. After a brief recess, the panel filed back in. Cameras zoomed. Pens poised. The chairwoman read, "Given the overwhelming evidence of fiscal mismanagement, document forgery, discriminatory enforcement, and harassment, the board hereby revokes Ms. Wellington's HOA membership privileges, bars her from any future association leadership, and refers all findings to state and federal prosecutors." Gasps, then cheers. Karen slumped, lips pressed white. Her lawyer patted her arm, already whispering about appeals that would never see daylight. 7. The media frenzy. Outside, microphones bobbed like cattails in the wind. Reporters peppered homeowners with questions. How did one woman seize so much power? What role did the FBI director play? Is this a warning to HOAs statewide? Olivia gave a single statement. Today's result wasn't a federal sting. It was neighbors refusing to be bullied. "I'm proud of them." Then she stepped back, letting Tina and Naomi bask in the cameras, a deliberate spotlight shift. Local papers ran with headlines. Clipboard tyrant toppled. HOA fraud exposed by community coalition. When the director next door fights back. State outlets picked it up. A national morning show requested an interview. Olivia politely declined. She had no interest in fame. Her victory was the quiet hush settling over the lake that evening, broken only by kids laughing and a single barred owl calling from the pines. 8. Epilogue of fallout. Within weeks, Karen's home hit the market at a steep discount, disclosure forms citing ongoing legal proceedings. Prosecutors filed charges for mail fraud and falsifying business records. Her arraignment drew another round of cameras. HOA bylaws were amended. Term limits, external audits, and a resident bill of rights enshrined in ink. Residents painted a mural on the rec hall wall, a sunrise over the lake with the words "Community First." Underneath, in smaller script, dedicated to everyone who spoke up. Olivia never signed it. She let her neighbors take the brush. But standing there one evening, watching teenagers add final touches, she whispered to me, "That's the real badge." And for the first time since Karen's reign began, Lakeview finally felt like home. Not a kingdom, but a community woven with courage, transparency, and a hard-earned peace. The letter was short, just 2 sentences in fact. To the members of the Lakeview Lakeshore Homeowners Association, I hereby resign my membership and any current or future claims to board service, effective immediately. Karen Wellington. No apology. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Just a silent surrender written in Times New Roman and dropped off at the town clerk's office by a courier. It was anticlimactic, almost quiet. And yet, the moment it was read aloud at the next HOA meeting, the room erupted into something I hadn't seen in months. Relief. Not cheers. Not celebration. Just shoulders lowering, brows unfurrowing, and a deep, collective breath drawn after too many months of tension and surveillance. The tyrant had finally packed up her clipboards and left. What followed was not chaos, but renewal. In the weeks after her resignation, the interim board, with Tina Barlow now unanimously elected president, got to work rebuilding the foundation Karen had spent years cracking. They began with the charter itself. The bylaws were scrubbed top to bottom. Vague authority clauses were replaced with explicit oversight language. The violation escalation policy was completely rewritten, requiring documented board votes for every single citation. Anonymous complaints could no longer be acted upon without investigation. Fines could no longer exceed HOA dues. And for the first time in Lakeview history, a community oversight panel was formed, a group of 5 homeowners elected annually to ensure ethical governance. My wife didn't run for any position. She sat quietly during the charter committee meetings, offering legal language and precedent where needed, never once invoking her title or experience unless asked. But when they drafted the final ethics code, a section outlining principles of transparency, non-discrimination, data protection, and due process, Tina insisted her name appear at the bottom. Authored in partnership with Olivia Sharp. My wife tried to decline. Tina smiled and said, "You've earned it. And besides, let the next Karen know exactly who she's dealing with." The community shifted in small but powerful ways. Neighbors who once waved from a distance now lingered to chat. Naomi's kids began holding lemonade stands at the trailhead. Mr. Harris, the man with the classic truck, offered hayrides on weekends. The Chowdhuries turned their annual Diwali celebration into a full community potluck, complete with lanterns strung across the rec hall and music echoing down the lake. Even the HOA board meetings changed. What used to be quiet affairs dominated by one voice became well-attended, agenda-driven sessions with open mic periods and rotating volunteers. The badge on Olivia's belt stayed hidden, but its presence was never forgotten. Not because she flaunted it, but because everyone remembered what happened when someone tried to push her around. At the next neighborhood gathering, a quiet picnic by the water, a small group approached us carrying a wooden plaque. Hand-carved, sanded smooth, and etched in dark letters, it read, "An appreciation of strength wrapped in calm, for standing up when it mattered most. Presented to Olivia and Mark Sharp. Lakeview's quiet storm." We both laughed, cried a little, and hung it in the ranch's entryway next to the mud boots and fishing rods. Life returned to what we came here for: peaceful mornings, rooster calls, firewood crackling under stars. No more citations, no more surveillance. Just a community healed by the very people it once feared and forever reminded that abuse of power never goes unnoticed. Karen had underestimated us. She thought she was dealing with just another couple on the edge of the lake. She didn't know she'd picked a fight with someone who trains others to fight corruption and wins. The ranch is quiet now. The water's still. But make no mistake, behind every peaceful property line is a boundary that, once crossed, awakens something far stronger than a clipboard. Because no one messes with the FBI. Sometimes justice doesn't come with warning shots. It shows up with credentials, a calm voice, and decades of investigative firepower. Karen thought she could bully a quiet couple at the edge of the lake. She thought a clipboard and some fines were enough to intimidate us off our own land. But she didn't know my wife. She didn't know she was dealing with the director of a federal agency, someone who doesn't blink in front of cartel bosses, let alone HOA presidents. Karen wanted control. She ended up facing the full weight of federal scrutiny. Audits, subpoenas, hearings, and in the end, a resignation letter dropped off in silence, and a house listed well below market value. But this wasn't just our story. It's a reminder that no matter how small the setting, be it a cul-de-sac or a cabin on the lake, abuse of power festers if no one stands up. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is open the rule book and shine a light. So now I want to hear from you. What's the most outrageous thing your HOA has ever tried to pull? Did they fine you for flowers? Flag colors? A birthday balloon? Drop your HOA horror stories in the comments. Let's make sure these clipboard tyrants know we're not afraid of the forms they file. And remember, if someone tries to weaponize rules against you, remind them what real authority looks like.